Okay, our next panel is going to be the private sector response to the typhoon in the Philippines. We've got a sterling panel of representing both the corporate and the NGO side of the response. All of our speakers will speak briefly, giving an overview from their perspective, and then we'll open it up to questions. Because there's a group of us, I think what I'll do is introduce people serially rather than all at once. Our first speaker is Marc DeCourcey, who is the Executive Director of Business Civil Leadership Center at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. This is an organization that monitors U.S. company response to disasters and other similar events. Before joining the BCLC, Mr. DeCourcey was Vice President for Strategic Partnerships at the American Red Cross. Please join me in welcoming Mr. DeCourcey.
Thank you, Murray, and good morning, everyone. One thing about the BCLC is you need to know we're part of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and what we do is we work with companies, some of which are up on this podium, to tell their story in the corporate citizenship space. And it could be around disasters, it could be health and wellness, it could be any number of issues. But we work with these companies to tell their story, to provide a convening platform for them to get together with other companies, with nonprofits, with state, local, and federal governments and international governments to share best practices, to find ways to work together, and essentially helping business make the world a better place. So in the disaster space, we do this domestically as well as internationally. I've been at the Red Cross for 8 years, 3 years as Chief of Staff, and I've seen everything from Katrina all the way to Superstorm Sandy. And now that I'm at the Chamber, I am able to work with these companies so they can help in the disaster space as well. So when Murray asked me to speak, he said, what is the role of the private sector in a disaster response? And it doesn't have to be unique to the Philippines, but this is our most recent example. And I would say this for companies, first and foremost, be prepared. And be prepared as a company for business continuity. Be prepared to make sure your employees are safe, and be prepared that you're able to work with your customers to help them be safe as well. Administrator Fugate at FEMA has this great saying about the whole of community, and I think it applies not just here in the U.S. but overseas as well, that you need these companies to be back online as quickly as possible to help a community recover. Whether it's a bank or a gas station, a pharmaceutical, a retailer, a provider of retail goods, these companies need to have their operations back up and running so they can supply the community with the goods and services that they've been doing pre-disaster. Then I would say, if you're able to do that, get to know your partners. Get to know your partners in government, get to know your partners in business, get to know your partners in the nonprofit community, so you can be part of the response. You can be part of the recovery. We've seen companies do this very well, and in instances we've seen companies not do it so well. And what we try to do at the U.S. Chamber is make those connections beforehand, so you're sharing those business cards beforehand, whether you're here or overseas. We work with our American Chambers of Commerce all over the world to do that. And if you've done all that, then there are ways to help. And we like to say there are 3 ways to help. You can give your time, your treasure, or your talent. And I know both Abbott and Coca-Cola do both, or all 3. I've got a list, and we keep a track at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation of companies who are doing good things in a disaster response. So for the Philippines, for example, we have a track of about $55 million in goods and services that have been provided to the Philippines. That's just the start, and that was only in the first month of the response. And as more companies weigh in with their time, talent, and treasure, that number grows. And during Katrina, it was well over $2 billion of aid. So just to give you a few examples of what that aid looks like, and this is a 25-page sheet, I've only highlighted the A's, Abbott being one of them. Sometimes they donate medical supplies, pharmaceutical supplies. They donate their employees' time. AT&T sent disaster response teams to the Philippines, very helpful. Coca-Cola sent product there. A lot of the product was already there, and they're sharing it. And I don't want to steal their thunder and tell their story because they can tell it so well. But this is just the tip of the iceberg of what companies can bring to bear. Citibank, very helpful in providing cash transactions. MasterCard, as well as Capital One, we're waiving fees. Again, it helps facilitate the recovery and relief process. The other thing that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce does is it brings together these companies in meetings and on phone calls during the response. So on the Tuesday following the typhoon, we got the UN, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, USAID, PACOM, and the business community all together to talk about what's everyone doing. So it was a coordination call. And we do these after every disaster. We did it 2 weeks post-event, and this time we invited a lot of the nonprofits who were coming into the Philippines and had people on the ground to talk, including the American Red Cross. And then some month after the disaster, we got the government of the Philippines involved. And we had Secretary Purisima, Secretary of Finance of the Philippines, really give his readout of what was needed and how companies could help. And all told, in those 3 phone calls, we had about 350 participants, mostly from corporate America, eager to help. And that made up this 25-page list of how companies were helping. So with that, I think I'll just stop there, Murray, and say that if companies can be prepared, they can be more integral in the response effort and the recovery effort. And then, of course, because they're for-profits, a lot of them want to be involved in a reconstruction effort. That's okay, because that's going to bring the communities back much faster and help more people. And there's a lot of work to be done, not just in the Philippines, but in any number of disasters that have happened over the recent years, whether it's in Japan or in Haiti or here in the U.S. These companies are involved. They have a corporate presence. They have customers there. And more and more they can focus on the before to be ready for the during. The community is going to be better off for it. So with that, Murray, I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Mark. Our next panelist is Suki McClatchy, who's the Senior Manager in Abbott's Global Citizenship and Policy Program. She oversees the company's disaster relief efforts and many of its global health access programs. Suki?
Thanks, Murray, and good morning, everybody. Ambassador, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thanks CSIS for bringing us all together to talk about such an important event. So I will provide briefly just some corporate perspective. I think what might be best is just to give a little bit of information about sort of how Abbott approaches disasters, and then give some examples. Abbott, like many others here, are very committed and have a long history of responding to natural disasters, and we do remain committed to supporting humanitarian efforts both here in the U.S. and around the world. We are uniquely positioned as a global healthcare company to be able to respond to healthcare needs during these times through our products, through our funding, and through our expertise, all of which can be mobilized very rapidly. In addition to ensuring the speed, we're also very conscious and put a lot of emphasis on high standards based on best practices and existing guidelines, and then working with others, to ensure that those standards are met. We're a founding member of Partnership for Quality Medical Donations, and I know that there are others here in the room and here on the panel who are also members. And that's a member organization of both corporations and of nonprofits that are dedicated to ensuring highest standards in product donations, but also sharing best practices when it comes to global healthcare programs. no two disasters are alike. I think everybody would agree to that. Our response, Abbott's response to disasters, is really based on the specific needs and the unique issues that are posed, and certainly are in respecting the government's, their requests and their needs and their practices during those times. We work with trusted organizations, and those are organizations both international and locally based that really understand what the needs are. They've done the needs assessments. They have they're very well placed in the communities. They're known to the communities and respected in the communities, and they have the ability and the expertise to be able to execute on the activities that they set out to do. And they're also accountable to that. So our response could include a mix of funding, cash, and expertise. And we also, during these times, encourage innovation in disaster relief efforts. I just wanted to give a few examples that sort of highlight, and then I'll talk a bit about Typhoon Haiyan. During Hurricane Katrina, I think that we were certainly able to leverage all of our assets, including our expertise in the business, to bring healthcare services directly to the communities in a very fast, efficient way. During Haiti earthquake, we had been working with Direct Relief previously on some projects that were related to technology and to be able to map all of the clinics in the areas, and so that came in very, very handy, of course, during the earthquake, to be able to understand exactly where were the clinics and ensuring that you're able to get products and the needed resources there as quickly as possible. During China earthquake as well, from the earthquake back in 2008, we had focused with Project Hope. We had really focused on finding some long-term solutions, and we had talked about this here today, is on the resiliency of communities. And so we were looking at how can we help to provide training for rehabilitation services. And so then when the earthquake struck earlier, I was going to say this year, but earlier in 2013, they were able to leverage those that were trained, but then also we again reinvested in these sort of longer term solutions through training, building capacity, while also addressing these short-term needs such as products and funding. And then during Haiyan, I think because we were all prepared as best as we could be, we knew that this was going to be a devastating event in advance. That there was already preparations being made in advance in order to be able to address the emergency as quickly as possible. And we've worked with CARE and with the Philippine Red Cross and also with Direct Relief and others, again, to ensure that we were able to provide both sort of the shorter term response and also providing longer term response as well. So we're also doing innovative work sort of on the front end, on the pre-positioning. Back post-Hurricane Katrina, we certainly learned that there were, that we needed to do things better and that we could do things better. And so we have, since 2006, been preparing in advance with Direct Relief International and with the food banks through the Feeding America networks along the Gulf Coast, and then expanding year over year, as we learn more, and that to pre-position product in those clinics and food banks in the communities, so that they'll be able to respond immediately, and also to be able to prevent overflow in the hospitals. So that for us has been a significant learning. So just to close, I think we are learning more, and we continue to be committed to understanding how we can do things better. And we certainly know, and we all know here, that we cannot do that alone. And so it's critical to create strong partnerships and continue to investigate, how we can work together to fill gaps and create the synergies that will be most important for addressing disasters in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll get it yet. Thank you very much, Suki. Turn next to Kate Irvin, who is the Group Director for Diplomatic Relations for the Coca-Cola Company. Kate has been in this position since September 2011. Prior to that, she was the Strategic Projects Director for the Chief Executive Officer of Coca-Cola, Mr. Mukhtar Kent. Kate?
Thank you, Murray, and thank you for organizing this conference, and hello, everyone. First of all, as we mark the 2-month anniversary of the typhoon, I just wanted to say that our hearts go out to all those who were affected by it and continue to suffer from its consequences. And also wanted to acknowledge all of the great work that's been done by so many people and many of the organizations represented here today to make a difference as far as the relief efforts go. I'm here actually representing the 7,000 men and women of the Coca-Cola system in the Philippines. That's the employees of our company and our bottling system. And, humbly, I'm very proud of what they are doing and have done, and hope I can do justice to their story, and also share just a few insights that they have relayed to me about the experience there. By way of context, addressing natural disasters and hurricanes and typhoons and the like is really nothing new for us. It's something that we've done for almost as long as we've been in business, which is going on 128 years now. And it's something that really has become part of our DNA, part of our instinctive for us as a system. Also, as a system, we have a very large network, and that network reaches very far and wide, as you may know, and we realize that that is a tremendous asset for us, and one we try to leverage as much as possible whenever there are circumstances such as Yolanda. So really the minute that our local team got word that there was a potential tragedy, they started to gear up to, number one, to ensure the safety of our people, to be supportive to our customers, to convert where we could our product lines to water, knowing that that was going to be in high demand, and to ready our fleet of trucks to be able to be responsive to any needs that might come our way. And then as soon as the devastation became clear, we just immediately kind of went into action, checking on our facilities, our people, of course, mobilizing to get the water out there to where it was needed, engaging our employees to help package necessary items for people that could then be delivered, and then assisting with the delivery process as well. I think there are three decisions that our leadership team made early on that really did shape kind of our approach and that have impacted how we have responded. First of all, I think they tried to learn from past experiences in the Philippines as well as from experiences that the rest of our system around the world has encountered. But taking those learnings, as a leadership team, the group there decided that they wanted to strive for cultural leadership in their response. And by that they meant that they wanted to set the gold standard and to use that as the lens by which they would evaluate our decisions. And without being arrogant, I think that did have a big impact on kind of the way they approached our response. Secondly, and not unique, but I think they recognized from the very beginning that it was going to be a long-term effort and that we really needed to focus not only on the immediate needs but on the long-term rebuilding efforts, and to ensure that our plans took that into consideration. And then third, based on some insights that we got from some social monitoring tools that we have, we learned that, about a week after the disaster, that people not affected in the Philippines were already starting to lose interest. And so our team decided that they really wanted to focus on ensuring that the relief efforts didn't get lost and that they could engage and mobilize the public and our consumers to be involved. And so they did this in a number of ways. But I think having taken these three decisions, that then shaped our response, and we decided to commit $2.5 million in cash and in-kind contributions. We set up a website to inspire consumers to make a difference and to give them opportunities to volunteer and allow them to sign up to volunteer, and also to share their stories so they could hopefully inspire other people. As mentioned at the last panel, we partnered with P&G and with USAID to set up an initiative to help Sorry owners, the owners of the very small shops and retail points, to help get them back in business. And so, this is kind of the way we have approached it. And because I'm from a marketing company, I thought I'd show you a video that just captures a little bit of the spirit about our approach. So if we could run the video, please. One of the other actions that we took shortly after the typhoon was we made a decision to suspend all of our advertising and to take the resource that we would have spent on advertising and channel that into our financial contribution. But where we were not able to do that due to contractual reasons, we ran pieces like this one to help inspire people to get involved. So that's a little bit about what we did. My team did share with me several learnings that we had and that we would suggest going forward in the future, but I know I'm among the experts and we're short on time, so I will save that for the Q&A.
Great. Thank you very much, Kate. We'll now segue into more of the NGO and non-government organizations side of our discussion. Our first speaker will be Thomas Teig, who is the CEO and president of Direct Relief International, which provides medical assistance to locally run health programs around the world. Prior to taking this position in the year 2000, Thomas was the chief of staff and COO of the Peace Corps, so he's got a lot of experience. Thomas?
Yeah, we're not a branding company, but you had two cans there, Coke. Yeah, although we've been around 65 years. So thank you to CSIS and Ernie and Sumitro Chair for hosting this, and to all of you for coming. Direct relief in emergencies, I think we do a lot of ongoing work, and typically, as in this case, you get attention during emergencies because that rivets attention, but really they tend to exacerbate conditions that are already there. The old learning is that the people who are most vulnerable, as Ernie said in his opening remarks, we know who they're the ones who are most vulnerable during emergencies. They were the same people who were most vulnerable the day before. They're the very young, very old, and the very poor, who typically live in the worst areas, the low-lying areas in substandard housing, and the research confirms that over and over again. So we see it in the Philippines as we've seen it everywhere else. In the response effort, I think the classic four, it's food, water, shelter, obviously, and medications and access to health services. Direct relief focuses on the access to medications. And as a completely now privately funded humanitarian organization, we were thankful that because of groups like Abbott that we work with, about 150 companies, they understand this. The inventories were damaged throughout the storm path. There are a lot of people who were put at risk, and we were able to mobilize and already provide over 80 tons of prescription medications valued at about just shy of $10 million already in the first 8 weeks. FedEx stepped forward. You know, among other things, an emergency is a huge logistical problem. You've got to rapidly reallocate resources to an area that's been compromised, and you don't know which resources are needed, and you don't know where they need to go, and you don't know how they're going to get there. So I think FedEx, one of the companies that we've worked with for years, like Abbott, said that's what we do. So put us down to help out. So they did an extraordinary thing. They provided an MD-11 aircraft that holds 100 tons of material, 220,000 pounds. And with that airlift capacity, we were able to move fast, work with a lot of the companies that we work with, like Abbott, that provided nutritional support, which is also very important. And then a number of the straight pharmaceutical companies, and provided over 160,000 bottles of doxycycline, other antibiotics, antifungals, which is really important, particularly when there's been a storm in a tropical area and the types of infections that you read about in the newspaper. We actually equipped both Mammoth Medical and Team Rubicon as they deployed out, because that's what we're uniquely able to do as the only nonprofit in the United States that's licensed to actually handle prescription drugs, and we do that in each one of the 50 states and run the largest charitable medicines program in the United States. So I think as we look at the situation going forward, I mean, it's a little early to take a victory lap. I think it's, I think people want to kind of say, well, the relief phase is over, now let's get on to it. Well, I mean, the reality is that these disruptive events, you have a moment where, it's disruptive, and you've got to sprint and keep sprinting, because once it's declared the relief phase is over, it bogs down and it stays there for a very long time. Look around at all the previous disasters. So it's really important to keep the urgency and the progress before it settles into that new status quo. Our focus is on both in Samar, in Leyte, in Cebu, and in Panay to work with the Department of Health, the local provincial health officers, to make sure that there are needs assessments being done, that the resupply of the facilities for straight health resources is being met, at least in the near term, till the commercial markets can get back engaged. We do with a very high level of transparency. If you look at the directrelief.org website, you'll see where everything goes, exactly, down to the lot number. We're very concerned about the issues of diversion. This is donated product, as Suki had mentioned. And one of the most exciting things I think that we've seen, we think it is a very important thing going forward, is there's a technology company called Palantir that has really made a name for itself in doing big data analysis, including with the U.S. military. They came to us and they really wanted to see if they could break through this traditional problem of everyone wants coordination to occur, but I mean, no one's against coordination, but yet every emergency finds a lack of it. And everyone likes coordination, but they don't like to be coordinated, they like to be coordinator, right? So I think a lot of, information drives activity. So if you're doing all this stuff with poor information, it's going to misfire. And that's the after-action review of every emergency. No big surprise. You move fast in high volumes with bad information, you're going to misfire. So Palantir developed a technology. We directly bought some GPS-enabled devices that work. We had a 5-month free contract that Palantir arranged with Iridium. So these were not subjected to, they didn't even need cell coverage, to preload in the Department of Health assessment forms that the Philippine Red Cross was using to go out and look, so they could actually go immediately, pull up their assessment forms, plug that in real time, and that's fed immediately. You don't have to wait to come back to the cluster meeting. The information is available when it's collected. There's been 130 assessments done on those InReach devices, a Maine company, running Palantir software. There's been trainings this week with the Philippine Red Cross, 20 or 30 people, with Gawad Kalinga, the civic group that has a lot of volunteers around the Philippines that are trying to go out and do daily census assessments of what's going on in the facilities, and also with the Department of Health, Regions 6, 7, and 8 in Lamar, Samar, Leyte, Panay, in Cebu as well. So I think we've been able to, again, the 80 tons of material that we've been able to provide has been distributed to 78 facilities. We will continue the pipeline going. I would say that the Philippine business community has been very responsive. They do have a logistics backbone. It's not Haiti. There's a viable, thriving commercial structure, and I think it's important for us just as a support organization to plug into that. So that's what we've been doing. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Thomas. Chris Paluski will be our next speaker. He's a Senior Director of Humanitarian and Emergency Affairs for World Vision. Chris has also a long experience in international relief and development activities, having previously worked for CARE, MAP International, Samaritan's Purse, and World Relief. Chris?
Thank you. So World Vision is an international relief, development, and advocacy organization. So we're in 100 countries. You know, we have 45,000 staff. We've been in the Philippines since, I think, 1952. We've got about 700 staff on the ground. And yeah, we've seen the work that we've been doing in the Philippines in the past in our development work and ongoing relief response, and this relief response well linked and I would say well coordinated with private industry, private corporations, private all around. World Vision is committed to working with the private sector in addition to the beneficiaries on the ground, so the people that we're benefiting with. So we find that when this is done with the beneficiaries and with the private sector, you can get goods to and with the beneficiaries more quickly and actually more impactful. So we've seen this actually in the Philippines with this past response. And globally, well, even in the Philippines, we've been able to do this in two primary ways. So first, we've been able to work with groups like Procter & Gamble. Before the disaster happened, we had product, we call it, pre-positioned. So we had these pure sachets on the ground, pre-positioned before the disaster happened. So we were ready to respond before things hit on the ground. So we had warehouses, and in fact, we had donated warehouse space from local corporations to house some of these goods. In addition to that, when the disaster hit, so we were able to get goods out to the field immediately, but then we had pre-established relationships with corporations here at the global level with groups like Boeing. So we had a warehouse here in the States. We had actually warehouses in Europe, Asia, the States, and we were able to partner with groups like Boeing to provide space on some of their aircraft to send it to the Philippines immediately. So we had some of the goods in the warehouses were actually donated. So we had donated goods with donated space going to the beneficiaries on the ground within, I want to say, the first 3 days of the response. In addition to that, we've seen at the global level, it's been very important for partnership with corporations at volunteer management. So corporations are always looking for ways to partner with NGOs at the local and the international level. This has been our experience. But people want to get involved with it. So it's great, you know, they can give money. And we are always, you know, we need that money to respond. But also we've been fortunate that many corporations have wanted to become even more involved. So they've helped pack boxes. They've helped get product out there. They've been involved with it. So we've tried to make them part of the process, and we feel like we have very good partnership on many different levels. In addition to that, we've seen that with some corporations, we've been able to get out advocacy messaging. So they've been able to get out the messaging around trafficking and around different topics that we've had pop up through different emergency responses. So we've tried to do this at the global level. But I don't want to ignore the local level and how important that's been for us, especially in the Philippines. Within the first, I want to say, 48 hours of the response, we had been working with, well, many different people on the ground. But we saw there was a grocery store chain. And they said, you know what, we have goods here, you know, we have a supply chain. Some of our facilities are still running. We have, you know, these big barges that can go between the islands. We have some of the trucks that are still working. We want to work with you. And we had been working with them in the past in our development projects. So we were able to leverage our relationship with this grocery store chain so that we were able to get the goods out to the field immediately using other people's supply chain. In addition to that, we had been partnering with groups, corporations and companies in the past in the Philippines, where we had trained their people, and they had actually trained us in many aspects on how to do distributions to make sure that the goods were getting to the beneficiaries. And yeah, we saw it as a good partnership at the local level. In addition to that, fundraising. It's been very helpful. So in the States here, we had groups, and I'll just give a couple examples, like the NBA, Royal Caribbean, Merck, Eli Lilly. They were the ones to come to us at the beginning and say, we want to give cash, actually. We want to be able to help you with this kind of jump start on the emergency response. So we've been partnering at a cash level. In addition, at the local level, people have been able to do fundraising. So we've seen it in the Philippines where they've been able to do some fundraising. And actually, I was contacted, I want to say 2 weeks ago, by our office in Central America saying, what can we do in Central America where we could fundraise for the Philippine response? So this was corporations in Central America who were contacting our offices that were interested to help out the Philippines. So it's interesting kind of how everything is actually connected. In addition to that, we've been able to, the fundraising advocacy. Okay, so we've got a really good relationship at the local and the international level, but there still are some challenges. As you said, that this disaster is not going to go away. So World Vision's been there since 52, 54, and we will continue to be there through the rehabilitation and the long-term development. It's always a challenge to have these longer standing partnerships where we're able to focus on disaster risk reduction, where we're able to address some of the core issues. So we are fortunate. We have been able to respond to 560,000 beneficiaries, people, as of this morning. I just got the report when I was sitting there. So we've had a really great initial response, but we're looking at the long term there too. So it's sometimes a challenge to find appropriate funding for some of these key issues like disaster risk reduction and also building it back better. I think we're getting there. And I would say with partnership with corporations, and governments and local authorities, it's coming. And actually I think we're doing a really good job. In the Philippines, I forget who I was talking to the other day. They said this is like and I don't want to pat ourselves on the back, but it's been a dream case for many of us that there's been a good relationship between corporations, governments, local authorities, and ourselves. So we felt like things have worked in tandem. And also the U.S. military, at the beginning, they came in, they realized what their mandate was, and they helped to clear the airfields, they helped to get things going, and then they said, okay, we're here to support, but let's let the people who do what they do, NGOs and government, do what they do. So overall, we've seen it as a very positive response, but we are looking for the next stage. So anyway.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Evangeline Gunnelis is the executive director of Feed the Hungry, Inc. Prior to taking her position, she was also a founding member. Vanji was a founding member of Feed the Hungry, but prior to taking her current position, she also was a longtime veteran of the World Bank. So, Vanji, please.
For 20-some years. An article in the Time magazine labeled the Philippines as the most storm-exposed country on earth, with good reason, because 8 to 9 typhoons hit the Philippines every year. And thank goodness for those who don't make it and fell into the seas surrounding waters. And Feed the Hungry is well aware of this. So one of our 6 core programs is calamity assistance and rehabilitation endeavors, which is very aptly called CARE. And for CARE, of course, the obvious purpose is to provide assistance to calamity victims and to think of rehabilitation projects that will get these people back to their daily lives. In addition to the budget that the CARE program has, we have set aside reserve funds in order to be immediately responsible or able to respond to calamity. So, and that's exactly what happened in Typhoon Haiyan. We had the reserve funds, and we immediately released the $10,000 in order to be able to tell these people that they are not alone, and there are people who sympathize with their plight. But then again, implementation was difficult because communication was shut, and the roads were not possible at all. And we were lucky at that time because two of our members of the board, the founders no less, were in Manila, and they met with our partners in the Philippines, the Commission of Filipinos Overseas, the Brotherhood for Christian Businessmen and Professionals, one of the representatives of Tacloban, the local government unit. And they thought, they looked at the places where they should go because the need is most. The two main objectives of the CARE program are first, to be one of the first responders to the calamity. And the second is to go to places where no one has reached. You know, during a calamity, international relief agencies, local agencies come to offer assistance, but there are so many places that are not reached. In fact, even Tacloban, which is the thrust of all these aids, there are some places in Tacloban that have not been reached, and we hear this. So we focus our attention on those places. So we have the first implementation did not happen until after 8 days because communication with our contacts on the ground was just totally shut. And of course, as I said, the roads were not possible at all. So on the 8th day, we went to Palo and Pastrana, Leyte. And we were able to give relief goods distributed to about 1,500 families who have not been reached by relief agencies. And these goods contain the basic needs that will tide them over for the next 3 days until they get their bearings together. The next one we went to, which was about 10 days later, we went to Cebu, we went to Ormoc, also in Leyte, but these are places that we have heard. We have partners in the Philippines. They tell us where to go. And the word of mouth is also very helpful because friends and relatives, they tell us, oh, we have relatives there who have not even seen any kind of assistance. And I guess one of the reasons could be that the big relief agencies have big trucks. They cannot very well negotiate the narrow and winding debris-filled roads to the mountainous places. But we, Feed Hungry, is a little enterprise, and we have small trucks. We're like the little train that keeps going. So we were able to do that. And to see these people who have been hungry for food, who have been hungry for assistance, to see these strangers who are there to sympathize with them is worth all the efforts. And as you know, the first two relief operations were just so dangerous because it's in the news that looting was happening because people were hungry. And so the volunteers were just in a dangerous state because they had to carry a lot of cash and they had to buy the goods from another place, which is in Sorsogon, a nearby place, before they can bring them in trucks to the place, the calamity site. So, well, I have to tell you that Feed the Hungry is a fully volunteer-run operation. So we have to really partner with people on the ground. We partner with the Rotarians, and they are just as committed to help everyone, to help calamity victims. So I'm supposed to share with you what we have done so far. So in addition to those two relief operations, we have given grants to several foundations who have, the first one is the Benedictine nuns. They run the Divine Word Hospital, which is the only running hospital in Tacloban. And they were badly damaged as well. Their laboratories were shut. They were flooded in the ground floor. But they continued to offer aid to those who came in hordes, the victims of calamity, until they ran out of medicine, food, and even electric power. The nurses and the staff, who were themselves victims of the typhoon, stayed behind in order to help those who were in need. So that we released funds to them so that they were able to buy medicine, immediate medication for the children and the adults. We also gave a grant to Ligaya ng Panginoon Foundation to purchase woodworking equipment to be used to process fallen timber. Because of the typhoon, lots of trees fell on the ground, and they not only cluttered the roads, but they were still useful. So these people ask for grants so that they can buy the necessary equipment to convert these fallen trees into timber that they can use to repair their homes, to repair their boats, so they can go back to their means of livelihood. And then the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program, we gave them a grant to buy sheets, corrugated sheets, in order for them to fix their homes. This too is a very good foundation that we're into helping. Then there's a soup kitchen in Sara, Iloilo. Now we're going away from Tacloban because Tacloban gets a lot of relief assistance. In Iloilo, there's a soup kitchen that provides sustenance to the calamity victims. Just no assistance that they have received at all. So we gave them a grant in order for them to continue operation. They were able to sustain, to provide sustenance to calamity victims in the area. And then we provided a grant to Negrense Foundation for fishing boats. Each fishing boat cost 20,000 pesos. And so we gave them a grant to buy 10 fishing boats, which will be given to 10 qualified families with which has at least 5 members. So that will give them the incentive to go back to their livelihood and be able to provide for their families. We went to the Benedictine sisters again because they asked for help. They have seniors who are graduating in March. They need to go back to classes in order for them to earn their degrees and then go back to be able to find work for themselves. So we went back to the Benedictine sisters and gave them more grant. And then, what else did we do? We have bought over almost 2,000 Noquero lamps. I don't know if you know about that. These are solar-powered lamps. We bought 2,000 of them, shipped to the Philippines, and will be given to those people in the calamity areas. Up to now, a lot of places don't have power, electrical power at all. So this will go a long way. This will last for years and years and years. We should have one at home. So right now, in fact, for January, February, and March, most of the members of our board will be in Manila, going to the calamity areas and looking at possible rehabilitation projects. And we'll be focusing on repair of classrooms. Education is very important. We need to get these children back to school. So repair of classrooms, repair of homes, and purchase of more boats for the fishermen. The coastal areas are the ones that were badly damaged, badly affected by the typhoon. We need to buy more boats, and we need to provide them with seedlings. So the members of the board are there assessing all these needs, and thank goodness our solicitation for funding, for donation, the response has been so tremendous so that we are able to do this. We have gotten grants from AARP, from the local labor unions, and so we are so thankful for that. Of course, there's so much to be done, and we hope to be able to do more rehabilitation projects. So this is still a long way to go, so much to be done, but we at Feed the Hungry is in this for the long haul. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Vanjie. We'll now open it up for discussion. If you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand, identify yourself. And if you also can identify the target of your question, because if you don't, we don't necessarily know who you'd like an answer from. So, please.
Nathaniel Hurd from, also from World Vision. This is a question for Mr. DeCourcey. As you mentioned earlier, the response of the private sector, of corporations, to the Philippines disaster was pretty overwhelming. We've also seen, though, in other disasters like Syria, despite the efforts of the Leadership Center, the response has been somewhat different. Is there anything that you think disasters that corporations tend to respond to in this kind of way, in this kind of overwhelming way, have in common? And is there anything we can sort of learn from that in trying to generate more interest and support in disasters where maybe there's less of a response?
Sure, no, and thank you for that question. I would say it's human suffering. To the extent that the nonprofit community and governments can show the companies what's happening and how they can best help, that's going to direct their resources, particularly if they don't have a presence in that country. I think that's part of the challenge for a lot of companies where they don't have an employee base, they may not have much of a customer base, they don't know how to help. And if we as a community can kind of direct that a little bit better, I think we're going to have a better optimization of corporate resources. Syria is a good example. I mean, UPS did a lot there, but I know a lot of other companies were wondering how best to help. And that goes back to what I said in the beginning about know your partners, and having a good relationship with the State Department, with USAID, and any other of the U.S. Based government agencies is a good start for those overseas operations.
Ambassador Krisha?
Well, let me express appreciation of the Philippine government to all of you, the members of the business sector, the American people, and the Filipino-American community for the overwhelming response and generosity that you have extended to the Typhoon Haiyan victims. My question to Vanji is, how do you ensure that there is no duplication between what government is doing and what you're doing in terms, because government is also trying to provide boats to fishermen, and I know that there are certain corporations, Philippine corporations, that are doing the same thing, like FINMA Group, for example, is providing about 200 boats particularly in Panay, and I understand there are other groups that are doing that. How do you ensure that there is no duplication in terms of what you're doing versus what the Philippine government, as well as other Philippine corporations and NGOs? Can you let us know? Yeah.
Sorry. We have partners on the ground, Ambassador, so they tell us where to go. So we rely on them to make sure that these people are not given duplicate assistance. And each of our projects are covered by memorandum of agreement. So I would assume that there's no duplication. They better not.
Thank you. With World Vision also, we're part of the cluster system, which is part of the United Nations coordination body. So we work closely with NGOs and we work closely with corporations to ensure that there isn't duplication. So in that same breath, the cluster system is coordinating closely with local authorities, because that's, at the utmost importance that we don't want to duplicate what's going on. So because of that, globally, we're part of the cluster system, and in the Philippines, we're part of that same cluster system. So it's almost something that's been replicated across the globe. In addition to that, when we're providing aid and we're providing goods, we use something called the sphere standards. So we try to provide appropriate goods and services to a certain level. And those sphere standards have been agreed upon by, I would say, the majority of the NGO community, so that we're not, for instance, with water. If somebody's giving a system that provides 5 liters of water per person per day, that's not enough. In the sphere standards, it says you need to be providing 15 liters of water per person per day. Same thing with shelter, same thing with the other sectors. So we try to adhere to, when possible, sphere standards, and at the same time work with the UN cluster system and part of the local authorities.
And Mr. Ambassador, if I could, I think from direct release perspective, we will report to you everything we do. And we will put it on our website. I think, one of the questions asked earlier was to you, is how are you being accountable? And I think the same question needs to come at the NGOs. There's a lot of money received on behalf of people in the Philippines that in direct relief case, there's no question, it will only be spent in the Philippines for the direct benefit of people who are affected. There's kind of the unseemly side of disaster fundraising, I think, and I've seen it, is that a lot of people will cite a highly visible event with no attendant obligation to spend it on that event. So this money was raised on behalf of people in the Philippines that ought to be spent there, and it's their money that NGOs are essentially held as holding in trust for them. So I think the transparency imperative that people were pushing you on, I think is equally true. It's very fragmented amongst a broad NGO community. There are no real standards. There aren't standards for that sort of thing. So I think the best thing we can do, we're working with your Department of Health and Social Work and Development, working with the regional provincial health officers, trying to mobilize vaccine for public health purposes. So it's got to be coordinated, and we notify everyone else through the cluster system as well. But I think the larger question about transparency and coordination, it's incumbent upon ourselves to coordinate and share. As you know, World Vision and Direct Relief are members of PQMD, as Suki mentioned. So we have regular calls. We see this all the time, and you know, no one's against coordination, but that doesn't mean we all do it as well as it could be done.
Just really quickly too, I just wanted to add that it's also the responsibility of companies. So it is our responsibility as well, and to the extent that we're able to, you know, we ask those questions. That's why, as Mark said, you know, you get to know your partners before a disaster hits, and so that's, you know, it's really important for us as a corporation to have that responsibility as well, to ensure that the right entities locally are engaged so that there is that coordination, and then working with BCLC, PQMD, other organizations that really try to bring together the right people so that there is not, to the extent that there can be, you know, not be the overlap.
Please.
Thank you, private sectors, for your very enthusiastic response to the Philippine typhoon. I'm Mr. Lloyd from the University of Maryland. We all have been discussing about material things. Now, on the non-material things, is there any assistance as far as non-material things is concerned? And I mean, on the first few weeks after the disaster, we Filipinos have cried, and our tears have all dried up, and we have families and relatives and connections in the area. Now, on the psychological side, psychiatric side, is there any assistance? These are non-material things, but very, very important, especially if you lost a family member. You find like your mother hanging on the tree, or your father is drowned and right before your eyes, especially for young children who are orphaned at a very young age. It could be very traumatic for them. And is there any assistance as far as psychiatric care, psychological care, guidance, counseling for these people who are victims? And I think non-material things is also as important as food and shelter and medicine. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. It's actually an excellent point. So at the beginning of the response, World Vision was doing life-saving activities. So we'd had the water and sanitation programs, we had food programs, we had the emergency shelter programs, and we still have a lot of these programs going on. In addition to that, we saw a priority as children's mental health. So children's protection, child's mental health, and we have child-friendly spaces. So at the beginning of the response, we set up child-friendly spaces for children displaced, children who were affected by the typhoon. They could go to a safe place that was secure, and then they could start the process. So we provided trained individuals to help children to, quote, decompress, where they could, we provided crayons, we provided buildings, we provided people who could talk to children and were taught to speak to children about traumatic events so that they could basically they'd gone through this horrible crisis, and we realized that they needed help too. And we, as World Vision is a child-focused organization, we saw that as key. So we did the life-saving activities. At the same time, we wanted to address children's needs, especially around the psychosocial.
If I could just say also, I think it's a humanitarian organizations, that's the point of it. We end up doing a lot of logistics and fulfillment of things. Money's important, but the human element is why probably all the groups get into it, including people in companies. I mean, they're people too. They happen to work in a corporate structure. And I think your point is essential in how one conducts themselves. Mental health is culturally embedded. Someone from New York or California going to do talk therapy in the Philippines might not be appropriate. So I think, to the Suki's point of knowing your partners, we think working with Gawad Kalinga and the local folks who have thousands of volunteers who are devoted themselves to social service, it's their country, it's their people, it's their families too. And I think among the things Direct Relief is doing is when we get money that's excess to what we can do to provide medical material support that's essential, we give it to locally run Filipino groups. The Zulig Family, the U.S. Philippine Society helped us direct cash that we said, look, this is for the Philippines. Money is always translated into goods and services. That's the purpose of it. So if groups that receive money for the Philippines can provide that to a Philippine-run organization that's better equipped to do some of those essential things, I think that's incumbent upon us to do it as well. It's a very important point, and the human tragedy is just striking to any. I was there the day before Thanksgiving, and it is heartbreaking for a non-Filipino to see that. So thank you for the question.
Unfortunately, I think the clock has overtaken us, but I know there's quite a few of you with questions. I hope I can volunteer the panelists if you have a specific question for somebody that you'll be able to have a minute to ask them before they leave. But I'd like to thank Vanjie, Chris, Thomas, Kate, Suki, and Mark very much for joining me on this panel. And please, the audience, join me in thanking them also. And thank you also to Abbott for its kind support for organizing this conference. Thank you very much.